Thank you for joining us for Broadway Peace Talks, where we take a deep dive into the histories, inspiration, and the people who bring Broadway shows to life on stage with Dr. Broadway, Kristen Presley. We hope that you'll enjoy today's talk on Pretty Women, and then join us February 8th through the 13th for the show at the Peace Center.
Struck. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kristen Presley. I'm a musical theater historian who has hosted these Peace Talks for the past 9 seasons at the Peace Center. I'm so glad that you're able to join us tonight. Hope you'll join us again at another talk in the future. We have them coming up for each show this season. So please plan to join us here on Zoom. Tonight, of course, the topic of conversation is Pretty Woman. And I imagine that is something that all of us are very, very familiar with. Of course, it's based on the 1990 film. So Pretty Woman opened or premiered in March of 1990. We're going to talk a little bit about that film. We're going to rehearse a few things. Again, most of it's probably very familiar, but some of it may come as a surprise to you. I know it did to me as I was researching this show. And then we're going to have a conversation with Matthew Stokey, who has been a member of this company since, I believe he said 2016. Very early in the process, he joined and was an ensemble member, which we'll talk more in detail about what that means with the Broadway company, and then is now on tour playing Philip Stuckey, which some of you may remember was the role played on film by Jason Alexander. So here we go. Without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. Again, I apologize in advance for any technical issues that may ensue. Let's see here. All right, here we are. So hopefully you're seeing what I'm seeing, which is my PowerPoint presentation. Now, like I said, Pretty Woman was produced by Touchstone Pictures, which was a division or is a division of Disney, and directed by Gary Marshall. Now, Gary Marshall was better known for directing TV shows like Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy and Joni Loves Chachi, The Odd Couple on TV. He directed these shows. Of course, he was famously the brother of Penny Marshall, who was a director in her own right. But he had been directing for television for a long time. And then in the late 1980s, he started to pivot, and he pivoted to film and directed first Overboard, which was a Goldie Hawn film in 1987. And then he had big success with Bette Midler and Barbara Hershey when he directed Beaches, again for Touchstone Pictures. And that's all part of the story here that will relate to Pretty Woman. So I mentioned that because it's going to be important in the process of Pretty Woman becoming a film first, and then, of course, later a musical. So, but before there could be a musical or before there could be a movie, there had to be a script, correct? And we have, we're going to talk a little bit about J.F. Lawton, who was the screenwriter. And I want to apologize. I'm getting some sound from somewhere. So let me see if I can find that. Let's see. Let's see. Well, I am hearing, George, if you're there, do you happen to hear that audio? Oh, there we go. All right. Problem solved. Sorry about that. Technical difficulty. I told you. Technology is great when it works, and sometimes it requires a little patience. So I appreciate you sticking with me. So at any rate, we're going to talk about J.F. Lawton, who was the screenwriter. Now, J.F. Lawton, you'll see his picture there on the slide. J.F. Lawton was a screenwriter who was born and raised in California, and he was the son of a novelist. His father wrote books, and in fact, one of his father's books was made into a film when JF was a child. And that film was called Tell Them Willie Boy Is Here. And it starred Robert Redford. Now, as they were filming this film with Robert Redford based on one of JF Lawton's father's books, JF would often go to the set with his father. And he very early in life, through that experience, became absolutely intoxicated with the film industry. And he vowed then and there that that's what he wanted to do with his life. Now, he struggled very famously. He's talked about it very openly as an advocate for others who have struggled with dyslexia. And so he found in writing and filmmaking a way that he could express himself that was a perfect fit for his learning differences. So he studied film writing, wrote some small scripts through high school, and then studied filmmaking at Cal State University in California, of course. And then after graduation, he did what you would expect him to do if he wanted to go into the filmmaking industry. He moved to Hollywood. He lived near Hollywood Boulevard and Western Avenue. Now, if you know anything about Hollywood Boulevard, you know, and if you've seen the film, you maybe have a little clue about this, but you know that Hollywood Boulevard is not the best part of Hollywood, right? This is not what we think about when we think about the glamour of Hollywood. But nevertheless, that's where he lived, surrounded by pimps and prostitutes and all kinds of folks that inspired maybe a script or two, and in fact, inspired several scripts that he wrote, most notably a script called 3000. Now, if you're familiar with the story of Pretty Woman, and I imagine all of you are, then 3000 probably makes your ears perk up. And I want to tell you how this script of 3000 was described by Julia Roberts. She described it like this. These are her words. She said it was really dark and depressing, horrible, a terrible story about two horrible people. And the character of Vivian Ward was this drug addict, a bad-tempered, foul-mouthed, ill-humored, poorly educated hooker who had this week-long experience with a foul-mouthed, ill-tempered, bad-humored, very wealthy, handsome, but horrible man. It was just a grisly, ugly story about these two people. So that's the story of 3000. Surprisingly, in the late 1980s, Sundance Institute picked up that script. They thought that they saw something to it. They thought it could be a really interesting way to zoom in on this society and to say something about it and shine a spotlight on it. So the late 1980s, Sundance picks it up, and surprise of surprises, a very unlikely film producing studio decides they might like to turn it into a movie. And that studio was Touchstone Pictures, which was a subsidiary of Walt Disney Studios. Of course, Walt Disney was not known for films that sound like what Julia Roberts described, but nevertheless, they were very interested in it. And they were interested in it because, like I said, when I was speaking about Gary Marshall, who had pivoted recently from directing television shows into directing film, had just had great success with Beaches, Bette Midler, Barbara Hershey, that best friend drama, Beaches. And Beaches was produced by Touchstone Pictures, which was that subsidiary of Walt Disney Pictures. And Disney loved the idea that suddenly they weren't just making films for children and families, but they loved the idea that they could reach a broader market by telling more adult stories. So that's why this script appealed to them so much. Again, pretty shocking when you think about all that we know about Disney, but nevertheless, it worked out well for them. So, of course, they brought in Gary Marshall, who had that success with Beaches. Gary Marshall and Lawton, the screenwriter, worked together to make a pretty significant overhaul in the story. And just in case anyone has forgotten, I'm going to share with you the theatrical trailer of Pretty Woman. And I do that for two reasons. One is maybe some of you haven't seen the movie, maybe some of you haven't seen it in a while, and this will help to refresh your memory. So that's one reason. Another reason is because the Broadway musical follows very, very faithfully the script or not the script, but the story of the movie. So in seeing this trailer, you'll also get a very strong taste of what you will see at the musical. So here it comes. This again premiered in March of 1990, Pretty Woman, starring Richard Gere and Julia Roberts, directed by Gary Marshall and written by J.F. Lawton.
Welcome to Hollywood. Everybody comes to Hollywood, got a dream. What's your dream?
When I was a little girl, I would pretend I was a princess trapped in a tower, and then this knight on a white horse would come charging up and rescue me.
Tell me how to get to Beverly Hills.
Sure. For $5.
You can't charge me for directions.
I can do anything I want to, baby. I am lost.
All right, okay. You change for 20?
For 20, I'll show you person. Wow.
Impressed?
You kidding me? I come here all the time. Well, color me happy. There's a sofa in here for two. Close your mouth, dear.
This is brilliant. Does she work? She's in sales.
Touchstone Pictures presents the story of a date.
Isn't a date, it's business.
that led to a deal.
I have a business proposition for you. I'm going to be in town until Sunday. I'd like you to spend the week with me.
Uh-oh. Another technical difficulty.
Welcome to
Let's see if I can
Hollywood.
skip ahead.
Right, okay.
Wow.
Impressed?
You kidding me? I come here all the time. Well, color me happy. There's a sofa in here for two. Close your mouth, dear.
Who is this girl? Does she work? She's in sales.
Touchstone Pictures presents the story of a
This
date
isn't a date, it's business.
that led to a deal.
I have a business proposition for you. I'm going to be in town until Sunday. I'd like you to spend the week with me.
Well, for whatever reason, this does not want to play all the way through. So I apologize for that. But again, I think most of you are by now familiar with the film, but there's the trailer. And you can see it was a stark difference between where J.F. Lawton started with his script about a drug-addicted Vivian Ward and a foul-mouthed but handsome, very wealthy man who hired her to spend the week with him. Now, interestingly, a couple of things that Julia Roberts went on to point out in that same interview about these characters is in that original version of 3000, the movie ends with him, with Edward, the role played by Gere, kicking her out of his car and throwing an envelope of money at him and saying, "I hate you." Again, not the way the ultimate film ended, not the way the musical ends, but nevertheless, a surprising, makes it all the more surprising that Disney looked at this script and saw it as something that would be appropriate for their audiences. However, as they usually do, Disney got the last laugh. This film premiered, as I've said, in March of 1990, was phenomenally successful. It had a budget of $14 million, which at the time was a really big budget. Nowadays, that's, a drop in the bucket when it comes to filmmaking and even making a show on Broadway, to be honest. But at the time, that was a pretty significant budget. But they got the return on their investment. It made almost $500 million in worldwide box office receipts and was the Disney's, to this day, it's their highest grossing live action film and their highest grossing R-rated film of all time. So Disney does it again, right? They knew exactly what to do. Now, let's talk about getting it to a musical. How do we get a 1990 film into a 2018 musical? Well, that's where we'll go next. And we'll talk.
Musical.
The idea.
All right. So that's where we enter Bryan Adams. Yes, that Bryan Adams. And we'll talk more in depth about him in just a minute. But Gary Marshall loved this film, as you can imagine. It launched, he already had a very successful career, but after a film like that, he certainly had his choice of whatever projects that he wanted, but he always had in the back of his mind making Pretty Woman into a musical. And as that became to be more and more the norm on Broadway, again, we look at this season alone. We just recently talked about Tootsie, which was a film that later became a musical. The next show is Frozen, which is a film that later became a musical. So as this began happening more and more, Gary Marshall thought this is the perfect story to turn into a musical. So it just never happened for whatever reason, though he tried to get it done for several years. Well, unbeknownst to him, the idea was floating around in the mind of someone else. In fact, Bryan Adams, who you probably know from songs like Summer of '69 and Everything I Do It For You, and so many other big hits, a Canadian rock star, he was toying with this idea around 2008. And I'm going to let him tell you where the idea came from and what happened from there.
The idea stems from a friend of mine who was working in the West End. Her name is Victoria Hines. She's a dancer in the West End in London. We were talking one day and she said, I wish someone would make that film into a musical. It would be such a good musical. I thought that's a really good idea. So I called my agent in Los Angeles and I said, do you know who owns this? He said, yeah, it's Disney. Disney own it. So I'll connect you. And they connected me with them. And this was going back to 2008. And they just said, no, we're not making that. 4 times a year, someone comes in and asks, and they didn't give a reason. I have my own thoughts about that. At this point, I was just sort of resigned to the fact that they weren't going to do it. What I did was just sort of forgot about the idea completely. And then about 7 years later, a friend of mine called Rob Roth, who was the director of Beauty and the Beast here in New York, came to my show. And he says, you should definitely do a Broadway musical sometime. It'd be so great. And I said, I tried to do that, but he goes, which one did you try? I said, Pretty Woman. He goes, they're making that right now. I said, really? He goes, yeah, I'll connect you to the guy. And he connected me to the same guy I spoke to in 2008. And they said, oh yeah, well, we'll connect you with the producer. And then the producer connected me to the director. And then I met the director and we had a chat. At that point, it seemed like it could be feasible to do.
All right. So there you hear a little bit how Bryan Adams was noodling over this idea. It was shot down. And he forgot about it until almost a decade later when a director says, you should write a musical, and come to find out the musical that he'd wanted to write a decade earlier was suddenly being produced. So he was connected with Jerry Mitchell. Jerry Mitchell has directed many of the latest, greatest hits on Broadway, including Kinky Boots and Hairspray and Pretty Woman. And Jerry Mitchell and Bryan Adams sat down and realized that they could probably make something of this. And so they set about to do that. It was officially announced in 2014 that the musical was going to happen. I believe Adams was officially connected to it in 2016. So, these things take time, but that's about where it fell in the process. And if you'd like to hear more about that, this is a wonderful podcast episode. Like it says there, Inside the Album podcast by Jefferson Studios with the host, Jesse Cannon, who is an album producer and has really interesting insights to give from that perspective. So I'd recommend that episode to you that's particular to this musical. But at any rate, Bryan Adams sat down with Jerry Mitchell and they realized that they could do this. So Bryan Adams called in his longtime songwriting partner, Jim Vallance, who had been his partner from the very, very beginning, literally from their teenage years in the early 70s in Canada. And they worked together on this. Now, what's interesting, the music is such a huge part of the film Pretty Woman. Obviously, songs like David Bowie's Fame, Must Have Been Love by Roxette, right? These are very Wild Women Do, as you heard from the theatrical trailer by Natalie Cole, some really big hits on that album, which went triple platinum. So a very iconic album with a very iconic film. But Adams and Vallance and Jerry Mitchell and Gary Marshall all came together and made the decision not to use any of that music. And of course, I neglected to list the title track, Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison, but they came together and decided not to use any of that music. And the reason for that was because, and it goes more in detail about this on that podcast episode. So if you're interested, definitely take a listen. But the reason that they chose to do that was because they wanted the songs to come from the characters. They needed the songs to advance the story. So they decided to scrap all of the music and not try to fit it in just for the sake of an audience recognizing it. They decided to start from scratch, and that's what they did. So the songs are all entirely original for this show. And that was the rationale behind why they did it, was to make it advance the plot, make it come directly from the characters. And another thing I'll tell you about the music. So when you see the show, you can listen for this, because I will tell you, in listening to the music from the show, you can pick up on it real quickly. They decided to set the time of the piece. So the piece is still set in the late 80s. They decided to keep that time and let Bryan Adams' music set it. So if you're like me and you're of a certain age, when you listen to the music from Pretty Woman, you feel very much like you were riding around in high school with the windows down on your car and probably your best friend in the seat beside you. It's masterfully done at capturing the sound of that particular period in time. So I think you'll really, really enjoy that. So that's how we got Pretty Woman the musical. It premiered in Chicago at the Oriental Theater in Chicago in March of 2018. And then it premiered on Broadway later that same year in August of 2018 at the Nederlander Theater, where it broke box office records for selling more tickets than any other show in an 8-performance week before it even opened. So it was a great omen for this show, which ran for just over a year on Broadway and has been touring ever since. So like I said, I had the great pleasure last week to talk with Matthew Stokey, who is a member of this company and has been with the show from very, very early on in its development. He was first working as an ensemble member, meaning he covered several different tracks. And I believe, if I remember correctly, directly, he describes what that means in our conversation and some of the bells and whistles that go along with that. And then when they transitioned into the tour, he was invited to play the role of Philip Stuckey. Again, that's the Jason Alexander role in the film. So I want you to enjoy our conversation. And then when we get back together here in just a few minutes, I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have about the show. So we are so thrilled to have with us Matthew Stokke from the company of Pretty Woman. Matthew, thank you for joining us. And I understand you're in Boston this week, preparing hopefully to get to Pittsburgh soon and then on into Greenville.
Yeah, we are. We've had a great run here in Boston, and the crowds have been fantastic. And now there's an impending humongous blizzard tomorrow. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully it won't be as bad as they say, but apparently up here when they say prepare for feet of snow, we get feet of snow. Right. And then we're supposed to go to my hometown of Pittsburgh on Monday. We fly out in the afternoon, which hopefully will give us time to avoid the snow, but I'm very, very excited. I always love going home. This whole stretch, which has been Philadelphia, Boston, go to Pittsburgh, and then we come to Greenville. I have heard nothing but awesome things about Greenville. I know people from New York who have relocated there in the last 3 or 4 years before the pandemic, not just because people split. I've never been to Greenville, and everybody raves about what an awesome town it is. So I cannot wait. Can't wait.
Well, I hope you're going to love it. And I know that, like you said, you're from Pittsburgh originally, but you've been in New York for a while. So I want to hear about some of the favorite roles that you've played since I believe your first role on Broadway, which was in Titanic. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
I saw that show, by the way. So really? What role did you play?
Well,
yes.
on Broadway, I was a swing. It was my first job on Broadway was a swing, which for those who don't know what a swing does, a swing is somebody who's off stage and learns oftentimes between 5 and 10 different roles. So that on any given night, if somebody is out, the swing jumps in and plays that role. It was something that I enjoyed doing when I was younger. You could not possibly pay me enough money now to do it. It's stressful. It's fun because I always found it fun because you get to play 5 or 6 different characters in the show, which other people don't get to do. But it was certainly, it's a stressful job. But for my first Broadway show, it was glorious. That show was so beautiful. I ended up doing it on the road for a year as well. And that's one of those shows that beautiful. It really,
well, I have to tell you one thing that happened at that show that I've never seen happen anywhere else. And you probably experienced it or saw it happen. The actor who played Bruce Ismay, I cannot think of his name, but I could, if I saw it, I could point at it and say, that's him.
On Broadway or on the tour?
On Broadway.
David Garrison.
That's right, David. I knew him from other shows. But I remember when he came out for his curtain call, like nobody clapped. And it's because he was such a spectacular villain, that we don't want to clap for that guy, right?
This happens to be a Pretty Woman.
I was about to say, we're going to get to that.
and I mean, Ismay was vilified. I mean, not to go too much into the Titanic, but he saved himself. The guy got into a lifeboat. He was the White Star. He was the ship owner, and that dude pushed people out of the way and got in a lifeboat. But yeah, that happened a lot. And there were so many wonderful roles in that show. That was my debut. That was in 1998. I had been in New York for 3 years. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and I went to New York in 95. So I've been living in Hell's Kitchen for 27 years. Wow. A proud denizen. And that was an extraordinary experience for anybody, to make their Broadway debut. My next Broadway show was certainly a huge feather in my cap, which was I got to be the standby, which is the person who goes on for one of the roles for my best friend, a guy named Patrick Wilson, who has gone on to be a rather large movie star. But he played the lead in the Full Monty, and I was his understudy. So we were the first 2 guys to ever play Jerry Lukowski in the Full Monty on Broadway, which I just pinch myself when I think that actually happened. That's one of my favorite roles. That was really great. And we did indeed go the Full Monty.
And what other favorite roles do you have? Because you've got many of them.
Yeah, I've been so fortunate. One that I did not do on Broadway, I did it in summer stock, was I played Billy Bigelow when I was younger in Carousel, which I do believe is probably, in my opinion, the pinnacle role for any young baritone who fancies himself an actor first and a singer second, even though you do have to be able to sing very well to sing that score. That was by far one of my favorites. I got to play Mortimer Brewster, that's his name, in Arsenic and Old Lace, which was super, super good times. Also just a melee of a show. I've been so fortunate. Pretty much I've enjoyed every Broadway experience I've had, culminating most recently with Pretty Woman, which I've been involved in. Yeah, I've been involved in that since 2016. So keeps on going.
I was going to ask you at what point you got involved with the production, because I know you were part of the original Broadway company. And in fact, I want you to talk about your winning being awarded the Legacy Robe in the company of the Broadway Pretty Woman. Tell us about that. What is the Legacy Robe?
So in 2016 was the first time I got involved with Pretty Woman. Jerry Mitchell, the director, who has been a very good friend of mine for years and years and years. When he came on as director of Pretty Woman, oftentimes directors, when you're doing early readings and workshops, will, rather than have auditions, they'll just kind of handpick people who they know they've worked with, bring them into a room, and you do the workshop or the reading of it. So a bunch of us who had worked with Jerry before came in to do the early readings. And you don't know if you're going to stay with the project throughout the whole thing, but somehow Jerry kept bringing me back. And lo and behold, next thing you know, we go out of town to Chicago and did our out of town there in the summer of 2018. Then we opened on Broadway in the fall of 2018. And I was the recipient of what is called the Legacy Robe. It was formerly called the Gypsy Robe for decades. And it started, I'm going to get some of these details wrong, but it started in the 1950s when Ethel Merman felt that the ensemble members were not getting their recognition that they deserved, that the chorus of the show, which oftentimes holds up a show, wasn't getting their just desserts. So she created this thing out of her own robe, which was to place it on a member of the ensemble who had done the most ensemble tracks on Broadway. They did a ceremony which involved turning around 3 times on stage. Everybody had to touch the robe, and then the person goes to each dressing room in the theater before the show starts to have it blessed. They walk into each dressing room, people bless the robe, you go on. And then when the next show on Broadway opens, that person goes to the next show, passes the robe on to the person who had done the most ensemble parts in that show. So I had seen this happen for years and years in the shows that I had done on Broadway. And it was always one of those things that I sort of had in the back of my mind, like someday. And with Pretty Woman, it was determined that I had done the most chorus parts on Broadway in our cast. So I knew that I was going to be getting the robe. And it was something I was so unbelievably proud of. And one of the best parts of it was, according to the man who was the keeper of the robe, David, this wonderful man, I was the first person to ever request at the ceremony, which takes place about an hour and a half before opening night of your Broadway show. I requested that my mother get to be part of the ceremony. My mom and I were very close. She actually passed away about 3 months after we opened on Broadway, but I wanted to make sure she was there. And it was not only the pinnacle of my career, but it was one of the greatest moments of my life to be awarded that robe. And what happens to the robe now is there are several robes. There have been dozens of robes. They're now actually in in a museum in Washington, D.C., not the Smithsonian, but somewhere else. I should know that. But every show makes a patch, which is about yay big, that represents their show, and it gets sewn onto the robe. So the robe turns into this patchwork quilt of all the shows that are running on Broadway for that year and probably a few years before. And you get to wear it. They took all these photos. It was honestly one of the greatest moments of my life. And my mom was there to see it. So it was...
well, I'm sure it was one of the greatest moments of her life too.
There's some amazing photographs, and
I bet.
It was truly, truly one of the greatest moments of my life. So it was one of those things that, when people asked me about it, I said, it's a matter of sticking around. I always tell young students, young actors, I was like, it's a tough business, but if you want to do it, the trick is just stick around. Through the good times and the bad times, I've had incredible highs and incredible lows. So if you stick with it,
pass it on to?
I passed it on to, oh my God. Marty. guy who was in King Kong, which was the next show to open after
Okay.
So I got to go. That was also a wonderful thing where I got to go and present it to the next person, which was really, really, really cool. So that was certainly a high point, and that was 25 years into my career. So it was kind of just a little cherry on top.
Yeah, and a great way to really acknowledge those who are the unsung heroes of Broadway, the swings, the understudies, the chorus members, just to give them, shine a spotlight on all that they do, because truly it wouldn't happen without them.
No, it's very true. I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks ago.
I saw.
So I was fortunate to do a show with Hugh Jackman. I did The Boy from Oz with Hugh for a year, and he's simply one of the greatest people on the planet. And he's everything you would hope that he is, and then some. And he was always the guy who was so interested in what happened amongst the ensemble, amongst the chorus. He was never, ever the star that other people would make him out to be. He also screwed around on stage as much as anybody I've ever known. So we had such great times. He still emails us. We did a Zoom reunion with him, and he was baking bread with Deb, his wife, while we were doing the Zoom. He's simply the greatest guy in the world. He would every now and again send me a message to send my mom a hello. Greatest guy ever.
Oh,
but he made a curtain speech a couple of weeks ago, basically lauding the work that understudies and swings do. And it was one of those things that I took. It made me very emotional that somebody.
And you knew it was authentic coming from him, having worked with him and had a relationship with him.
Simply.
And for those who are watching now who don't know, Hugh Jackman's currently on Broadway in a revival of The Music Man, and he is playing opposite Sutton Foster, another multiple Tony Award winner.
One of my dearest, oldest friends. I met her when she was 18 years old.
Well, she's come a long way, and so have you, right? So I know that you said you've been with this show since 2016. So you're with the Broadway company now on the road, but you're playing different roles. So tell us who you played on Broadway and then who you are playing on the road now.
On Broadway, I did basically what I've been doing my entire career. I played just about everybody. I've always referred myself as a socket wrench on Broadway, or to make a baseball analogy, I'm a utility infielder, where basically if something needs done, they say, yeah, get Matt Stokey, he'll do it. Yeah. And I'm also bald, which means they can put wigs on me anytime they want.
Easy transformation.
Easy. That's exactly right. So I played a number of characters in the Broadway company that through the workshops and readings, it all changed around. I played the landlord. I played a rich guy. I played it was so much fun, but I understudied the role of Stucky. Now, Stucky is the Jason Alexander part from the movie, which if you remember, not a great guy.
Right. We're talking about David Garrison playing that villain. And I did think there was a link to you playing Stucky.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I haven't been able to play too many baddies in my career, which is kind of fun, but this is such a fun role to play. So I understudied my friend Jason Daniely on Broadway. Jason and I have been friends since 1993. I understudied him, went on for the part several times. And I loved playing it. I just loved it. I really kind of sunk into it and just loved it. And then when the tour was originally going to go out, I was interested in going out on tour as the role. Of course, the pandemic happened. Didn't know if the tour was even going to happen, if any of the tours were going to happen, if we had jobs ever. And then when they started playing the tour last spring, I got a message from general management, would I be interested in going on tour and would I be interested in playing Stucky? And I said, hey, it's a job first and foremost, which there aren't many of. It's a show that I love. It's a role that I absolutely love. And to get to take it over and play it on the road, I almost immediately said yes.
Sure.
I told my agent first, but then I said yes. And it has been, oh my goodness, it has been so much fun. But like you were talking about David Garrison getting booed.
Yeah, sure.
I've gotten booed a lot on tour, which is always, it makes me laugh because it does mean, hey, you're doing your job.
That's exactly what it means.
But oftentimes I react like, it's not me.
Right.
I'm like, yes, yeah. You're booing the role, but I'm like, hey, come on, I'm a good guy.
Right. So, well, we have suspended our disbelief a little bit too hard, right?
Sometimes. But oh my God, it's so fun.
Yes. Well, I tell you what, we have several audience members who love to ask the question about the differences between the Broadway version and the tour version. So you are uniquely positioned to tell us how is what we would have seen on Broadway in 2018, 2019 different from what we're going to see on the road right now? Or is it different?
By and large, it's the same show. There have been some structural changes. There have been numbers that have been amended. Not many major things. There was actually a song that Stuckey sang at the beginning of Act 2 called "Welcome to Our World" at the polo match with all the posh people from Beverly Hills. That song basically got eliminated. There's parts of it, but it didn't. It was a little superfluous. It was basically a song about how arrogant and stuck up all these people are. Didn't really need to ram that down people's throats as much as, we thought we might need to. So it's been amended. It's now a longer scene. It's the scene where Edward informs Stuckey that Vivian is a prostitute, and it changes, everything that happens in the show. But for the most part, except for maybe a couple of lyric changes here and there, some adjustments to some choreography, it's essentially the same show. We didn't want to mess with it too much. If you're putting a show such as Pretty Woman, which is so iconic, on stage, you really need to give people what they expect. Mm-hmm. So all the greatest hits are there. So if you're coming to see the musical because you love the movie, we're giving it all to you.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the lyrics. And so for this, though, the soundtrack for the film was like triple platinum, huge hit, had songs like Must Have Been Love by Roxette, which is certainly in my wheelhouse, right? But this, they scrapped that. There's an all new score, but they brought in Bryan Adams. Yes, that Bryan Adams Canadian and Jim Valens. Yeah. Right. So when you listen to this music, I automatically feel like I'm driving around in high school with my windows rolled down because it feels so of that period. I wonder if you can talk about the music.
It is
what it's like. Yeah, just talk about the music.
It's indescribably Bryan Adams, for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about it. No
doubt. Or indistinguishably, one of those words. It's definitely It was a great fit for the show. The guy, people don't realize Bryan is still touring. Bryan is still selling out stadiums. Bryan still has a flourishing career. The man, he and Jim both were just unbelievable songwriters. I mean, if you go back and look at his hit parade, it's quite impressive.
Oh, no question.
As big as anybody in pop music ever. No question. And when you hear the songs in the show, like many pop icons, you instantly recognize the hooks. The guy just can't help but write melodies. He just, they just come out. And kept it very true to the genre, the 1990 world. You got a lot of guitars, you got some synthesizers, you've got, it sounds like Bryan Adams. It lends itself to the time period. And hey, I'm not going to lie. The first reading we did, I walked in and I got to, hang out with Bryan and, get notes from him and talk on breaks. I was giddy.
Starstruck, I imagine, as we all would be.
I've been very, very lucky. I've worked with some of my childhood pop heroes, Sting and David Byrne and Elvis Costello. I've done shows with all these guys, and I mean, they're all on another level. Bryan was just a different thing. I was just like, I was back again in high school, listening to those songs. So it was pretty exciting. I'm not going to lie.
I heard Jerry Mitchell, an interview in which Jerry Mitchell, who is the director and choreographer of this show, in which he said he wanted the music to create the time, to evoke the time. So. And man, it was that mission accomplished because it really puts you back in that space in a beautiful and brilliant way.
And they're all just earworms. They're just, it's like so many of his songs, just once it gets in your head, whoo, boy.
Yeah. No
Which
question.
Is mark of a good writer.
Oh, no question. No question. So I wonder, do you have a favorite song or a favorite moment in the show, just in general?
The final scene with Vivian, which is unpleasant. I say this about Stuckey. There's not a lot that Stuckey does in the show, but everything Stuckey says is important. And it all forwards the plot. It informs who he is, but it also informs who Edward is. it kind of informs what maybe society's view of Vivian is. He sort of is kind of, how people might have looked at her and how might have treated her. So the final scene where I get my comeuppance is a very serious acting scene. It's, and it gets violent. If people remember the movie. However, in this version, she gets the best of me. I'll just say that. But it's a wonderful scene, and it's wonderful to do it with Olivia Valli, who plays Vivian. She's a tremendous actress. She's sincere and open and honest. And we have a moment, because there's a lot of fluff in the show, but there are serious moments, and it's a great scene, and we take it very seriously. And every night you lock in, you really do. So it's a really, really fun scene to do on an acting level with somebody who is so just dialed in like Olivia is. And we really have a lot of respect for each other, and we really love to do that scene. And it's the emotional, kind of apex of the show, and it leads right to what happens with her and Edward afterwards. So it's a great moment. I take a lot of pride in that scene.
Well, so tell me, what is it about this show? The film premiered in 1990. There aren't many romantic comedies that have been more successful than Pretty Woman. And it certainly launched the career or helped to launch the career of Julia Roberts. I know she'd done some films prior to it, but at that point she became this international superstar. Yeah. But what is it about this story that makes it so timeless? Why do we keep telling it over and over? What makes this something that we need to come out and see? What is it about the story?
Well, certainly the popularity of the movie had a lot to do with the stunning, not debut, but certainly the coming out party for Julia Roberts, who came to one of our shows in New York and just could not be a more. You understand immediately why certain people become mega superstars, right. And she is one of those people. You're around her and you're like, whoa, I totally get it. And also the sweetest person and just so awesome. But I think there are several themes. One is the underdog winning, the girl with the heart of gold who wants a better life, and also the redemption of a guy who might have almost lost his soul and found it again because he found someone to love him. There's a lot of underlying themes about fathers and sons, about regret, lost time. It touches on a lot of things. It touches on greed. When your heart is empty, you make up for it in other ways. And also kind of sticking to what you want. Vivian is a complicated lady underneath, the guise of a simple Southern girl. And she's, she wants what she wants and realizes that about herself in a short time. And then let's not discount the fact that just the overt romantic qualities of this show, people love it. It's a fairy tale. And she says it right at the end. I want the fairy tale, and she gets it. And I think, I'm a pretty optimistic person, and I don't believe right now that there's any more rancor amongst the powers that be or people than has ever been in our time. And I think there's actually a lot more good going on in the world than people really take note of. But regardless of that, I think right now people can use a little bit of pixie dust. I think we can use a little bit of love. And it's a fairy tale. It's a happy ending. At the end of the show, we fire off confetti cannons. What else do you want?
Oh, come for the confetti cannons, right?
Yes. We're in a Jerry Mitchell show. You fire off a confetti cannon, you end with your arms up, and everybody goes home. So it's that's exactly right. And it's but it's a great thing to get to do. It was people walk out and they have smiles on their faces, and they if they want to escape for a couple hours, they can escape for a couple hours. And right. And just enjoy themselves. And if you got a boomy, go ahead and.
Yeah, there you go. Tootsie just came through. That was our most recent show, was Tootsie. Yeah. Another one of those shows, not only a movie adaptation, but also just so fun. Just Tootsie
is one of the best.
Happy.
Tootsie when I saw it on Broadway, I thought it had one of the funniest books of a musical that I've seen.
Totally agree.
I sat there and belly laughed. Like,
yes,
really full on belly laughed. I'm very protective and very fond of the Full Monty, and I think the book of the Full Monty is the best book to a musical that I've ever performed, and I think one of the best ones ever. It was also written by Terrence McNally, which helps. But quite often in a musical, the book will get overshadowed by a score, as often is the case. But that book, to Tootsie, I sat there and laughed like a crazy man. I just thought it was so good. And I think people want that right now. I really do.
Yeah, certainly. What the world needs now is a big belly laugh, right?
There's a place for Next to Normal and Dear Evan Hansen and Les Miserables and things that are heavier and delve into very important material. But there's also a time just to go and laugh and enjoy. And you want to see the pretty girl in the red dress and the necklace and she rescues him right back. And you know what? We give it to you every night. And it's really a really fun show to do. I'm so blessed to be part of this. And the cast is fabulous. My good buddy, Adam Pascal, and I have, we're the old men on the road. We make jokes about it, when we were younger and touring, and, now we're the guys, we're the ones who are and Adam's, we've known each other for years, but we've become really good friends on the tour. And we're getting ready to go to the gym. We got to stay in shape.
Well, I'll hustle. So for our audience, Adam Pascal was in the original company of Rent, and he was in Greenville most recently playing Shakespeare.
That's right.
In
on Something Rotten.
Yeah. And he was spectacular. So we're thrilled to have him back. We're thrilled to have you join us in Greenville in a few short weeks. So we'll see you then. Hopefully you won't get stuck in Boston and you can actually get here.
I'm so looking forward to it. I've heard nothing but wonderful things. So I really cannot wait.
Well, I hope we live up to the hype, and we will see you very soon here in sunny South Carolina.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for your time.
Very welcome.
All right. I want to, just before you say goodbye, I also saw Boy from Oz. So,
oh, you did?
Yes, I did. And Stephanie Block was, she matched Hugh Jackman, in my opinion.
She did.
Tit for tat. She was unbelievable. I have thoroughly enjoyed following her career as it has escalated since then, because she was just absolutely unreal.
How about Isabel Keating as Judy Garland? That was shocking.
Unreal. Oh, I totally agree.
She became her.
Absolutely. It was a great show.
I was an understudy to Michael Mulheron in that show. Michael Mulheron played his agent. I can't remember his last name, but so I got to go on as his agent a bunch of times, and I was very young at the time, but I always said that I got to do something that not many people got to do, which was there was a moment in the show when playing his agent, when he says, keep your hands in your pockets. Always keep your hands in your pockets, because Peter Allen was always doing this.
Yeah.
And Hugh would say, my hands are going to do what my hands are going to do. And he would grab me by the face and kiss me right on the mouth. And I was just like, I had people offer to come up and
imagine.
Can I please kiss you? Because I know you just kissed Hugh Jackman. So
share the wealth, right? Share the wealth.
One of those things. I was just like, for the rest of my life, I got to kiss Hugh Jackman. So
there you go. That is a feather not many of us have in our caps. That was congratulations.
I have my.
Look at there. There you go.
I've kept this. It's wearing into nothing, but I've kept it for years and years because it was something you couldn't buy. Your mouse pad. So I kept that. I've been so lucky. My career has been blessed beyond my imagination. So I
appreciate spending time with us.
You're very welcome.
We're so grateful to have you, and I don't want to keep you from your workout, but tell Adam Pascal we're excited to have him back in Greenville.
Make sure you say hello when you come to the show. Please do.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. Have a great evening and stay warm.
We're trying. Thanks so much.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye. And I see here that there is a question. Not that it matters in terms of seeing the touring version, but why did this show have a relatively short run on Broadway? You know what? That's a great question. And that's one. So the question is, let me just say it more clearly, asking, why did the show have a relatively short run on Broadway? It ran from August of 2018 to August of 2019. And I don't know the answer to that. There are great shows that run for a real long time, and there are great shows that run for not as long of a time. So I don't know the answer to that. There's a lot of different moving parts at play there, but it's been a big hit, received so warmly since it's been on tour. I believe the tour actually kicked off in Providence, Rhode Island. It's been on the road for a while now. Like I said, just coming from, it was in Boston, and then this week it's in Pittsburgh, and then it's going to make its way to us. We do know now that snow that threatened to keep them in Boston has subsided, so they've been able to move on in their tour, and they are on track to be in Greenville starting next Tuesday, February 8th. So I thank you all for joining us. And hope that you'll join us again. We'll be doing this for Frozen. Like I said, it's another one of those film to stage adaptations. And I hope you will join us again for that one when we talk. I believe it's set for March 28th, which is a Monday evening, again at 6:30 p.m. So since there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our session tonight, and hope to see you both at the theater next week for Pretty Woman, and here again on Zoom for Frozen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for tuning into Broadway Peace Talks with Dr. Kristen Presley. For more information or to purchase tickets to the show, go to our website at peacecenter.org.